mentioned social media earlier, and I know it's been, a movement before social media, but I do see on social media that, I mean, even me, like I'm just watching videos on different things. It just broadens your view and perspective, even in things pertaining to yourself. Like you think you have your identity all wrapped up, and then you learn something new, and then you find that online community. So do you find that social media is playing a role in it, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the rejection that Garifuna folks do is because of social media, right? Because part of what social media disrupts in the Afro-Latinx movement is that, not everybody with a curl is Afro-descendant, right? And I think it creates this idea of like, I think Afro-Latinidad can easily become another form of mestizaje, right? Where you're Black, but you're mixed, right? Or that this Blackness is diluted into other cultures, it's other, right? Like there's something that Afro-Latinidad can easily permit a decentering of Blackness rather than a centering of Blackness that makes it foundational to the very formation of Latinidad, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what Garifuna folks are constantly rejecting is that, right? They're like, Afro-Latinidad can't just be this moment where people opt in and out of Blackness, right? Mm-hmm. It can't be this moment where Spanish-speaking Black people who just either understood their Blackness today or understood their Blackness 500 years ago, right, can't be in conversation with each other because it's not the same political fight, right? And part of the larger intellectual genealogy of Afro-Latinidad is also like, how do you reckon with a society that has always already been anti-Black, but was predominantly Black, right? So in other words, during the history of the transatlantic slave trade, the archive tells us directly 10 times more enslaved and free Africans came to Latin America and the Caribbean. There are less Black people in the United States than there are throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. There are more Black people in Latin America and the Caribbean than there are in the US. Mm-hmm. So that should be a household fact. Everybody should know that. In fact, from all the Black communities in the Americas, African Americans are the smallest. Yet they're both politically the loudest. And because of US imperialism, they're deemed, right? They're seen as these only Black people, right? In other words, they're deemed as the sole bearers of Blackness of the Americas, right? That in fact, Blackness throughout Latin America and the Caribbean has been so diluted and mixed that it's not really Black, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
So, Afro-Latinidad can easily become that, right? And that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about a project of Afro-Latinidad that does not center Black people, and that does not center Blackness, right? As the very pillar of what we understand Latinidad to be, right? Latinidad would not exist without Black and Indigenous people. Point, period. Point blank. That's it. Yes. There's no ifs and buts. There's no maybe, maybe not, maybe yes. Nope. That's it. That's that's it, right? Yet we don't live in a time and in a moment where that's understood as clearly the reason. So there's still a lot of work to get done. And I think social media distorts that sometimes for us. Listen, I'm glad when a Puerto Rican wakes up and realizes, oh shit, I'm Afro-descendant. And if that Puerto Rican looks like Bad Bunny, we're in different political movements. Entirely.
True.
Right? Opposed to a Puerto Rican who wakes up today and realizes that they're Black and have looked like Tego Calderon their whole life. Right? That's a different project, right? That's the project I'm in, right? Where the anti-Blackness of mestizaje takes away generations of Black people's affirmations of their Blackness. And what Afro-Latinidad should do, it's reaffirm their Blackness, right? Through a real way, right? Not through I have 3B hair, I'm Afro-descendant. I'm Afro-bourgeois, I'm Afro this, I'm Afro that. I hope I'm making sense.
No, complete sense. It's a refreshing perspective because even in my anthropology course last semester, we were doing studying Indigenous peoples in Latin America and the Caribbean. but we actually touched upon this, and it was the discussion of like phenotypes and, you know, that whole discussion, like who can say they're Latin, Afro-Latinx, you know, like, and then there's even people that reject the term Latinx. Like they're like, well, why is the X there? Why can't we just go back to, so I know it's a very layered, complicated, so, but even like, I'm like, my ancestry is Jamaican, but I grew up in New York. And sometimes I'll talk to my Black, you know, American friends, and I'll mention something like mad Jamaican, and they're like, oh yeah, I keep forgetting you're not regular Black. And I'm like,
right.
Going back to like, what do you, so it's just this conversation of Blackness and who gets to claim what, and yeah, it's deep.
Murky. It's murky,
yeah,
it's complicated, it's layered.
very much so.